and thank you for viewing our presentation today. The title of our talk is Examining Associations Between Time Perspective Dimensions and Tobacco Use in 3 Samples of Adolescents in the United States. I am Mello, and later on we will be joined by Julia Moon, and I'd also like to acknowledge Laura Finan as a co-author of this work. Before we begin the presentation, I would like to acknowledge the other contributors, which include the graduate and undergraduate students in my research group, as well as the generous funding that we've received from the Tobacco-Related Disease Research Program, which has supported the project we are presenting to you today. Tobacco use remains a critical public health issue for many reasons. The majority of adult tobacco users began using as an adolescent, so this is a key developmental period to focus on. And every day, many adolescents smoke their first cigarette or use their first tobacco or nicotine product. Adolescent use of e-cigarettes, such as vaping, has reached epidemic proportions and has actually reduced many of the gains we saw in the reduction of tobacco use across time. Tobacco use is frequently co-occurs with other substances, including marijuana. And this issue of comorbidity has increased in interest by public health educators, policymakers, and researchers. These issues are not specific to the United States. Globally, nearly 1 in 5 male adolescents and 1 in 9 female adolescents reported using tobacco in the past month. So this topic overall is of extreme importance, in part because of the use that I have reported here, but also because it is strongly related to many physical health consequences, including disease and death. Now I would like to describe how we define time perspective. In our conceptualization, we include 3 distinct time periods: the past, the present, and the future. We also include multiple dimensions. Broadly speaking, these may be thought of as feelings and thoughts. Feelings include positive and negative attitudes towards each of the time periods. For example, positive attitudes towards one's past. Thoughts include one's relative emphasis or orientation to one of the time periods. So some individuals are oriented towards the future, de-emphasizing the past and the present. Prior research has shown some evidence that time perspective is associated with substance use. Studies have shown these findings with regards to tobacco and marijuana. Most intriguing are studies that have shown that time perspective leads to changes in human behaviors, in particular with career planning and physical health. These findings suggest that time perspective perhaps is a modifiable mechanism that can lead to reducing risky behaviors and promoting health behaviors. In the project that we are presenting to you today, we sought to bridge together the 2 literatures of time perspective and tobacco use to address the following 2 questions. How are time perspective dimensions, including feelings, as in time attitudes, and thoughts, as in time orientation, associated with tobacco use? And if we did observe findings, were they replicated across schools? Replication is an important endeavor for social sciences, and we sought to contribute our research to this area. And now I will turn it over to Julia Moon, who will continue the presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mello. Our study included 3 independent samples from the United States. Sample 1 included adjudicated adolescents who were high school students facing expulsion, and samples 2 and 3 included adolescents from the general population. In all samples, the average age of participants was around 16 years old, and about half of the samples were female. To the right, in Table 1, we provide more descriptives, including tobacco use rates. Data for these samples were collected in 2010, 2016, and 2011, respectively, from public high schools in the United States. We received active parental consent and adolescent assent. Participants completed anonymous surveys and were provided a compensation of $10. These procedures were approved by the University Institutional Review Board. To measure the time attitudes and time orientation dimensions, the adolescent and adult time inventory was used. Time attitudes, that is, positive and negative feelings about the past, present, and future, were measured with 6 subscales, with each subscale examining positive or negative feelings for each time period. For example, the past positive subscale examined positive feelings about the past with items like, I have very happy memories of my childhood. As you can see, alphas for these subscales were generally in the 0.80s. A recent meta-analysis on these subscales has demonstrated their psychometric validity, internal consistency, and 6-factor structure. Time orientation, or relative emphasis on the time periods, was measured with the item shown on the right. This item shows the time periods as circles, and participants were asked to select one figure that showed how important the time periods were to them, with larger circles being more important. For example, an adolescent who emphasized the past over the present and future would choose figure 1. On the other hand, an adolescent who emphasized all time periods equally would choose figure 7. Tobacco use was measured in samples 1 and 2 by asking adolescents how often they used tobacco. And in sample 3, we asked how frequently they used tobacco in the past month. Negative binomial regression analyses were conducted, and results showed that for samples 2 and 3, more negative feelings about the past and future were associated with more tobacco use. Results also showed that adolescents who emphasized all time periods equally generally reported less tobacco use than those who emphasized only 1 or 2 time periods. For example, in sample 3, adolescents who emphasized the past and future over the present reported tobacco use rates that were greater by a factor of 5 compared to those who emphasized all time periods equally. To conclude, our findings showed that time perspective was associated with tobacco use in adolescents in the United States. Specifically, more negative feelings about the past and future were associated with more tobacco use, as well as emphasizing 1 or 2 time periods as compared to emphasizing all time periods equally. Further, these patterns of observed associations generally replicated across samples from the general population, but differed compared to the high-risk sample. Given these findings, curriculums may reduce and prevent tobacco use in adolescents with varying levels of risk by targeting specific time perspectives. Thank you again for viewing our presentation. You can follow Dr. Mello's work through her website and social media.